This is All India Radio. In the program News Analysis, now we bring you a discussion on GST, a landmark step towards integrated tax system. The participants are Prakash Kumar, CEO, GST Network, and Arjun J. Chaudhary, journalist.
Mr. Kumar, what are the challenges really for setting up an IT infrastructure to process all the invoicing and then to collect the taxes which the government requires for public finance?
Three main functions which face the taxpayer is done on GST portal. And that's our main responsibility to put in place the portal, which we did on 8th of November. The first one is registration of taxpayers. The second one is payment of taxes. And the third one is filing of return. So as I mentioned, registration process we started on 8th of November for existing taxpayers under central excise, service tax, VAT and other small taxes, so that everyone could be ready before the GST gets rolled out from 1st of July. And by now, 67.5 lakh out of 83 lakh existing taxpayers have already enrolled. And then we opened on 25th of June for new taxpayers registration under GST who are not registered today. And in the last 5 days, we have 90,000 new taxpayers who have also registered. So that's the registration part. Payment is not different because the way majority of indirect taxes, whether VAT, service tax or central excise, they file or rather pay electronically, 97% of taxes. Same thing happens here. Only thing what government has done, now they have also allowed NEFT RTGS from any other bank, which means you can make payment from any bank, and then also allow credit card and debit card. So that's the second part. The third one is filing of return. Now, good part is in last 7-8 years, all the VAT departments have automated. So the taxpayers today file returns online in all the states, as well as for central government service tax and central excise. The difference is that here, business to business invoice data has to be given, which happens today only in 9 states. So that's the only difference. But the flip part is you only give your supply, which is sales data. The system generates the purchase data of everyone based on sales data, and which the taxpayer has to accept, and then the system generates your liability. So what happens here that it's interactive, and based on the supplier's data, the purchaser's data is created. So you don't need to give supply and purchase. You need to give just supply, and then system automatically gives you. So all the errors which are caught later on today are taken care of while making the entries into the system.
The GSTN network, for many, the importance lies in imputing the input tax credit, which ensures that the cascading effect of GST ultimately benefits the consumer. How do you manage to ensure that proper records of input tax credit is put up on the screen?
That's what precisely I was explaining. Once the sellers, everyone is a buyer or a seller, and this is business to business. So he uploads his supply data. Suppose I am a seller and you are a buyer, then automatically your purchase data will be shown to you, and that is what gives your input tax credit. So all you need to do is to accept, reject. You can also modify, and suppose I have forgotten as seller to upload something, you can add that. For small and medium taxpayers, and especially those who are just selling to consumers, they don't have to do business to business because they don't have. And that's the large number of our taxpayers. For them, the return is just 5 lines. All the turnover of at 28% if they have, then 18%, 12%, 5%, and other 0%. That's it, the total turnover and the tax amount. Second, government has also done for turnover up to 75 lakh, you can go for composition scheme, where you have the total turnover and the tax rate applicable, and that's it. So majority of people, it's not going to be complicated, which people think. It's not business to consumer invoice. It's only business to business. And that will be applicable, and that's the way system generates so that your input tax credit is visible to you throughout the month. It's not, you don't have to wait for filing a return. As and when your supplier uploads information, you can see that, okay, this invoice which was issued by my supplier, I have made payment and it has come to me.
Mr. Kumar, you've also served as IAS officer and with the sales tax department as well. How do you see the GSTN network helping the tax officers who have been retrained in the GST network?
In fact, our mandate, the GSTN's mandate is only for the front-end portal, but later on we were asked to create backend for 27 states and union territories, which means all the officers of these 27 states and union territories are going to work. In fact, they have already started working on one system which we have created. Now, the good part is, across the country, the system is same. Today, we have 27 states, 27 different systems. It's uniform. Like in GST, returns are uniform across the country. Challans are same across the country. Registration form is same across the country. Similar way, our tax officers also see the same. So even if they get transferred, which doesn't happen, but central government officers, they get transferred from one place to another. The interfaces are same.
So this integration of the indirect tax system, which has been promoted by the GST Council, headed by Shri Arun Jaitley, the Finance Minister, under the guidance of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, we have seen that the tax base will now increase. What does this mean for public finance now that there is transparency in record keeping?
Yeah, so that is what Honorable Finance Minister was explaining in one of the TV interviews, that the government needs finances to undertake development works for roads, bridges, and also for many welfare programs. So higher buoyancy in the taxes, which means government has more money for undertaking this, which will ultimately lead us to the path of development and our aspiration to become a developed economy.
This GSTN network is also drawing from the anti-profiteering clause from the amendment bill. Is that the information correct, so that there are those parties that do not take advantage of the non-payment of taxes?
No, the anti-profiteering part, that has to be handled by the tax department officials, which is largely where if there is any total reduction in the price on account of change in taxes, they should pass it on to the customers. So that is handled by the tax department. Our infrastructure is to ensure that the returns which are filed, they are processed properly and then shown to the tax officer as well as the taxpayers.
You have spoken about subsuming of the indirect taxes, both central and state, and one comes to mind: excise, countervailing duty, service, cess, surcharge at the central level. At the state level, you have VAT, which you spoke about, which is a sales tax, tax on interstate sales, local tax, entertainment tax, purchase tax, mandi tax, luxury tax, tax on lottery and betting, octroi and entry tax. So how did you create the architecture for this GSTN network, which allows for subsuming so many types of complicated taxes?
So good part what GST Council has done, so you just forget about from where you are coming. They have created one kind of format for everyone. So it's not that you are bringing the legacy data into this. And that's the reason we had to enroll all the taxpayers into the fresh system with their current data. Because the data was in different formats in different departments. And many places it was not fully available. So that's the part we have done. So we are not bringing them with their records. No. They have to give fresh data as per today. And what we are also doing, PAN of the business gets validated from income tax. PAN of all the promoters against gets validated from income tax. In case of companies, the SIN, the director's identification number gets. So what we are doing essentially, they're using various other government departments, their databases to validate. So you don't need to file a scanned copy of PAN or DIN or SIN or Aadhaar. No. It all gets done online.
The GST network is assisting the collection of taxes by the center and the state, where there's a revenue sharing of the tax proceeds. And right now the understanding is that consuming states will have an increase in revenue proceeds versus producing states. Do you agree with that assessment, or do you agree with the assessment that states where there is both production and consumption are best benefited by the GST network?
See, GST is a consumption-based tax. Currently what happens, like used to happen till 30th June, a manufacturing state, when they export, they also get 2% of CST, and they used to keep that. Now that's not going to happen. Buyer pays entire IGST, but then that IGST is available to him as input tax credit. So the tax gets to the state where it is consumed. So what the economists, I'm not an economist, they say that overall the consuming states, they will benefit more. What we are doing based on the returns filed, that tax adjustments or adjustments of IGST will happen. The data will be provided to Department of Revenue, which will ultimately then do adjustment between center and the state.
There's also the 4-slab tax structure, which is 5, 12, 18 and 28%. To tell us something about a tax slab on a variety of items which GST network has to process.
So what we have done, the tax rates are never hard-coded into the design because they can change any time. So it's always kept outside so that whenever the government announces, and government gives only few hours to the IT department to make the changes. So we keep it in a separate table. So all the rates which have been announced today, like starting from 5%, 12, 18, 28, and then we also have gold and silver. There's a separate rate. So these are kept separately in a lookup table, we call it. And whenever change is required, you can make it there. And the program fetches that data from there. So it's not that difficult. And that's the way all tax departments do.
There's also the cess aspect of the tax collection, which will help compensate states over a 5-year period, with the base period, I believe, being 2015 to 16. How do you see the distribution of proceeds being aided by the GST network?
Yeah, so what will happen here, luxury items, the certain identified item cess is there. Now that cess will also battable, meaning that if the supplier is paying that after collecting it from the purchaser gets input of cess against the cess. Now this cess will be counted separately. There is a separate accounting head, and that goes into one fund at central government, and which will be used for financing if there is any fall in the collection of a particular state vis-a-vis 15, 16 figures and a growth rate which has been announced by the government.
So when you put together such an enterprise, so what is the cost benefit to the taxpayer? Because earlier, with the system so diverse and opaque, one could not really compute the time and cost factor when it came to filing returns and paying of taxes.
See, once you do it from a department which is part of the big government, you don't take out the costs. Here, our cost, everyone sees what is our total cost and how we are doing. We are audited not only by our statutory auditor but also by the CAG to see that how things are going on. So yes, that's correct, because here, whatever is spent, not only on the software development and hardware and network, etc., but also on our office and salary, etc., and then how cost effective we are.
My congratulations to you, Mr. Kumar, on setting up the GSTN network and being the CEO of this forward-looking company. Now that the tax base is likely to go up as far as the economy is concerned, how do you see the GDP, the gross domestic product of the country, benefiting from this, not only in the short term, but over the course of 3 to 5 years?
See, there are different economic papers which are available which say that the GDP growth will take place between 1 to 2%. What our responsibility is to ensure that if the number of taxpayers goes up, the system performance should not degrade, and they should continue to get the same kind of performance. And as is the want of most of us, we file returns on the last day. So how do we ensure that they do it without any challenge and they can comply with that? So what we did while designing the system, we have taken lots of safety factors. For example, like number of invoices per month, business-to-business sales. When we got collected data from 9 states, we found 127. So that we have kept margin of 300%. Similarly, the whole system has been designed to withstand 1.3 crore taxpayers, where we're starting only with 65, 70 now. So that we don't have to make any changes and we can give a completely different kind of experience to our taxpayers.
We are in the first week of July right now. What is the projected growth rate according to your records?
Based on the past data of VAT departments, we found that 10% new taxpayers come and 3% people cancel. So net increase is around 7%. But we have gone little higher because we had anticipated that some of the sectors which were not taxed under VAT and central excise, like textile and all, they will come here, which means there will be sudden jump. Our anticipation is in next 5 years, it may touch a figure of 1.2 crores or 1.3, but anyway, time will tell where we are.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prakash, for being with us and giving us your extensive technical expertise on the implementation of the GST regime through the GSTN network. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
You are listening to a discussion on GST, a step towards integrated tax system. The participants were Prakash Kumar, CEO, GST Network, and Arjun J. Chaudhary, journalist. The program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks